What's up, everybody, and welcome to the live stream. Yeah, we're back finally after quite some time. But I'll be doing a year-end video, probably this week or next week, just to explain what's happened. But the channel has done really, really well over the last year, despite there not being much video content coming out. So one of the most successful videos we've actually had is on the issue around AMD drivers, and especially the AMD driver people having issues with games crashing. So I just wanted to cover a few things with regards to the new drivers and few optimizations, but I will be doing a full video on this in the new year. So yeah, let's just get into it. All right. So firstly, looking at the drivers, one of the big important things. So I previously had the Strix 5700 XT graphics card, and that GPU did have issues. So if you've been following the channel, there was a problem with the backplate screws that didn't clamp down the thermal pads properly onto the VRMs, and there was a heating issue. I am now on the newer Strix 6700 XT with the new upgraded cooler or new cooler design from ASUS. And one thing to always mention or watch when you're gaming. So at the moment, I've got PUBG open and it is running. Is you want to see your temperatures and your junction, specifically your junction temperature, because your junction temperature tells you basically the temperature of your die and more specifically your VRMs. So the one big issue with the AMD cards is that some of the older ones uh, do have an issue where they would overheat. And the maximum I see usually when gaming it goes to about 60 or 70. But once you reach 80 or 85 degrees Celsius, I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but once you reach that point, you will reach a thermal limit, and then obviously you would have a crash. So the GPU would shut itself off, and the PC does a hard crash to the point that where your screen goes blank, um, you don't see anything happening on the computer, but the PC is still on, and you have to do a hard reset. Okay, so just looking at the driver, firstly, we on the latest version that's up to date. I I would say go with the recommended ones, but I do sometimes use the optional ones. So at the moment, I'm on version 22.11.2. So basically, how AMD does it is 22 stands for the year 2022, and from the 11th month, so this was from November, and it was the second reiteration or second version of the driver within that month. Now, one important thing to do is to make sure when you start or install a driver, make sure that it's a clean install. So you want to use something like DDU installer, or within if you've got a previous AMD software or AMD driver and you're updating it, it'll give you option to do a factory reset. So I would recommend doing that. You want to start on the standard settings. So it's important to choose standard, because if you choose gaming, esports, power saving, you're going to get very low performance. In esports and gaming may push the card towards that thermal throttle. So I basically start off on the standard setting for global graphics, and I use Radeon image sharpening, and I set that value to about 80. And I also make sure when you get to the bottom here, texture filtering quality, you want to make sure that it's set on performance, right? I also do specific settings within games. So, say for PUBG, for example, um, I enable anti-lag. You can use Radeon's FSR or super resolution, and boost I don't use. I just use image sharpening. But basically, in the advanced settings, is for the anti-aliasing, you want to use the application settings, and there's a reason for this. If you make the driver want to control the graphics a lot, there would be an issue because the driver would clash with the game itself, and that is also a big cause of games crashing or failing while you're playing them. So use application settings, texture filtering quality, you want it on performance, and tessellation mode, I normally set it to override application settings but turn it off. So you want the game to control the graphics as much as possible, right? Um, the next thing within performance, when you have your performance monitoring, you want to head over to your tuning tab. So I think it's important to be realistic, right? So if you've got an entry level graphics card and it's meant for 1080p gaming, uh, but you want to play on 1440p, you can't expect high frame rates, right? The GPU is not geared or designed to do that, right? So it's important to make sure or understand that um, what your GPU was actually designed for. Now, I do understand, graphics card prices were ridiculous over the last few years, but we've reached a point where they're coming down significantly, and there's new GPUs entering the market. So it's possibly a time for an upgrade, and there's very good second-hand prices on the second-hand market. Now, within the GPU setting, so on CPU, I got it on overclock CPU because basically that uses, I've got a Ryzen or AMD 5900X CPU, and that uses something called Precision Boost Overdrive, which I enabled within my BIOS, but I set a temperature thermal throttle limit to 75 degrees there. Let's see, the temperature is currently 62, and because I'm streaming, it's now obviously working up a little bit harder at 4.3, but once I start gaming, that goes up to about 5 gigahertz. Now, when you get within the tuning control for the GPU, by default, it may be set to overclock, and you want to make the automatic tuning default, or if you have a thermal issue. So while you're playing games, if you're seeing that the junction temperatures are going very high, because remember, the design of the cooler is very important for cooling down the VRM and the GPU die, as well as your case. Make sure your case is well ventilated. It's not in a hot environment, because that's also going to push your temperatures up. Because remember, and I assume majority of people using GPUs are using air-cooled ones, right? Unless you have a custom loop system, or you have these newer hybrid GPUs that have um, liquid and air cooling, right? But majority of people out there will be using a air-cooled graphics card. So you want to make sure that it's set on the default setting, and if you want to do manual tuning, I would suggest going to the manual tuning if you've got a thermal issue, and it will give you a warning, obviously, of accepting. And as you can see within my manual custom tuning, I've got GPU tuning disabled. That meaning I don't want it overclocked, because I don't want the card running hot. I don't want any VRAM tuning. And the only thing that I play around with is fan tuning, right? So basically 0 RPM. This is basically if the GPU is below a certain temperature, the fans won't turn on. You can turn that off, but then you must remember that obviously your fans will be running all the time, and then that affects the lifespan of the fans, and there's more power draw from the GPU, and obviously it will be more louder. And then you got your advanced controls where you can enable it, where you can actually control or set your fan curve profile, and you can set a max speed. Now, yeah, it's set to 100. Usually I would put it around 80, because I don't really have a thermal throttling issue. But if you were going, if you have a thermal issue on your monitoring when you are playing games, so you can log it as well within the uh, metrics here on under the performance tab. you can start a log of these parameters that you have for your GPU and CPU while you are gaming, and then you can see at which point, if the game crashes or the PC freezes up, what the actually issue is. Right? The second big thing is obviously within Windows, right? So you want to go to your search bar and let's see. Okay, I am blocking the search bar right now. So let me just remove myself here quickly. So within the search bar, you want to type game mode, right? And it's going to bring up something called game mode settings. And when that window opens up, you will find that with the Windows updates, it would be turned on. Now, game mode from Windows, it was designed so that you would have maximum resources sent towards your games while you are gaming and you won't have interference from other apps, etc. But this seems to be, from forum posts and other videos out there, seems to be a big issue. And it was a big issue for me before. And once I turned this off, I had a lot of games actually start working and not crashing on me. Right, so the Windows itself can also clash with your games and with your drivers. So you want to turn game mode off. Obviously, if you have a very high-end GPU, so you're using something like a 4080 or 4090, or now AMD is going to come out with the new 7900 XTX. I'm hoping to get my hands on one of those. Then obviously you can use game mode. It's not going to affect your frames or the thermals of the card, etc. But as a general rule, you want to put that off. The next thing is to the side, you want to go to graphic settings. So variable refresh rate, you want that off. And then under graphics performance preference, right, you want to browse for your actual game files, right? So for example, I've got PUBG running in the background here, and I found the exe files, which I have normally, it's within Steam apps common, PUBG TSI game binaries win64 TSI game.exe file. You can Google and find out where your game files are, or you can use your launchers like in Battle.net. You can open up your game folder and then find the actual exe file. And then you want to go to options and you want to select high performance and save that, right? So it's going to give you the maximum performance for your game. And the second thing is that sometimes if you find that your games are still crashing, you may want to find that exe file and then right click on it and run it as an administrator. So when you run it as an administrator, basically you're allowing maximum resources from the PC towards obviously the game or the application that you are running at that point in time. So basically that's just a small update. AMD seems to have fixed a lot of issues that it had initially with the Adrenaline software, and it's just gotten better over time. Um, like I've shown you, there are a few tweaks you can do to the software. Make sure you use a DDU installer and uninstall previous versions. Make sure game mode setting is set off, and under graphic settings, you want to find your actual exe files and then select high performance. Now, obviously, I am running Windows 10 still. There is Windows optimizations that you need to do for Windows 11. So there's a friend of mine that games with me, BT Shader. He had Windows 11 and his games would just crash. And then he ended up reverting back to Windows 10. So there is also an issue with Windows 11. People must understand that out there. And there are some videos on YouTube that you can search for where you have to do optimizations within Windows 11 for games to work. And then obviously you got issues with the games themselves. Usually when there's a big update like with PUBG now, there would be random crashes. I'm hoping there isn't today. Um, and then obviously COD. So like when Call of Duty Modern Warfare first came up, a lot of people reported random crashes. I've been fortunate and I haven't had one yet. But yes, there's been people where the games randomly crash while they're playing. freezes up. That happens to me if I go jump into Warzone. Jump out of the plane. If I'm diving, it would freeze for a few seconds and then unfreeze. So these issues with games themselves as well. That's something you always have to remember. So if you got a general issue where the game is your GPU is crashing with all games, you can say you can put it down to maybe a driver issue. And then it's always important to make sure that the other components within your system are also always running correctly, so that like you don't have a power supply issue, there's not a RAM issue, but you would see that on boot up. And other important thing, expectations. So more and more applications and games nowadays have compatibility for multi-core and multi-threaded performance, because all CPUs are multi-core and multi-threaded nowadays with higher clock frequencies that run at much better and optimized temperatures. So a lot of the games have become CPU intensive as well, not only just relying on the graphics cards. So if you've got an older CPU, much older CPU, maybe it's time to consider upgrading, because that will limit your frames. And like I say, be realistic. If your card is designed to do 1080p gaming, you're not going to expect to see 144 frames per second at 2K, or above 100 frames per second at 4K, right? So that's where you just have to be realistic about things. But anyway, I hope this video was informative. I was actually waiting for my friend Gloam to join, so that we could start some PUBG and maybe stream it. But maybe I'll just start another video with a PUBG stream. But anyway, this has been an update for the AMD drivers. Thank you for everyone that's shown support and love to the previous video, which has done actually extremely well. Let me just get into that video. Can tell you what our stats on that video currently is. Okay, analytics. So yeah, that previous the previous AMD driver GPU crash fix, the first one, is like on almost 31,000 views, and there was obviously an update video to that, and there's been numerous comments on that video with more than 776 hours of watch time. Yeah, Zaji, sorry man, I'm just on a stream at the moment. 1 second. So yeah, that video is done really well. So hopefully these updates and fixes will sort your issues out. And yeah, just from our side, make sure you follow us at our socials, which are down this side on the screen at the moment. And yeah, please also, um, if you watched our videos, if they've helped you, please share it with somebody out there. And yeah, hit that subscribe notification, which is up here. Yeah. If you hit that subscribe button, we're trying to get to 1,000 subs. That's going to be our new goal for 2023. Reason being, if we reach that point, then it opens up a lot of more doors for us to grow as a channel, and then obviously bring you guys a lot better content out there. But anyway, have a blessed week, stay safe, and we'll